Just give a few seconds just to let everybody filter through. Okay. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever in the world you're joining us from, and welcome to those watching on Catch Up. I'm Joji Waits, BALPA's Director for Flight Safety Policy and Regulation. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the second of several webinars covering BALPA's latest fatigue campaign, which we launched recently. If you're thinking, oh no, I've missed the first one, don't worry, it's largely a repeat of what we'll be covering today. It's also a pleasure to be joined online by my two colleagues, BA Safety Rep Glenn Morian and NEC and TUI Company Council Rep Mark Karim. You'll be hearing much more from Glenn and Mark shortly. So the plan for the webinar is to explain why we're doing this work, and there's a key opportunity for us to grasp here. Why it's so important, what tools are available. For example, there is an app which we will demonstrate. What's the plan going forward? And most importantly, what can you do to help us? There'll be time at the end for questions, so please use the dedicated Q&A function on Zoom rather than the chat. If you'd like to ask us anything, feel free to put those questions in as we go along, and we'll come to those at the end. Also, just to let you know that this webinar is being recorded, and we'll share the recording with all our members later, together with that from the first webinar. So, why are we doing this work and what's the opportunity? Well, the UK Operations Regulation, which contains all of the requirements associated with flight and duty time limitations, or FTL, and fatigue risk management, also contains an obligation on the UK CAA, the Civil Aviation Authority, to conduct a review of the effectiveness of FTL provisions. So we're now in the midst of this review, which offers a genuine once-in-a-generation opportunity to highlight areas that need improvement, areas that need clarification, or where new requirements are required. And most importantly, to actually influence change. Now, the importance of this opportunity cannot be overstated. Now, one of the most important requirements, arguably the most critical, I think, in successfully influencing change, is to generate credible and unequivocal evidence of the safety risks that exist and how these risks are driven by current FTL and FRM practices. So we have lots of powerful anecdotal evidence, but I think we're lacking probably in the volume of objective, quantitative data to corroborate those subjective views that we all intuitively know are representative of current operations out there. Now, this lack of data is also reflected, I think, across the industry as a whole, with a few notable exceptions out there. And that includes what that data held by the CAA in their MOR database, so the mandatory occurrence reports on fatigue that they collect. So this is why we've launched this campaign and why your experiences and data will be such an invaluable input to this review going forwards. So enough from me for the moment. I'll now hand over to Mark and Glenn, who will offer their perspectives from a pilot's point of view and will demonstrate the fatigue reporting. So over to you, Mark, to kick us off. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Joji, and thank you for everyone joining us on this grey November or December afternoon now. It's good to have the opportunity to talk to you and to explain what we're doing from a NEC and a pilot's point of view. In way of introduction, my name is Mark Karim. I've been with TUI for about 23 years, company council member, and also on the NEC. I came on the NEC and really wanted to concentrate on industry-wide issues, and we've got two big ones to get our teeth into here today with the app, that of fatigue and car parking. Now, I'm sure you've all felt fatigued on the aircraft at some point and seen a direction of change over the last few years. This has been possibly exacerbated by a pilot shortage coming on and the change of our rules from the beloved old CAP 371, which is imperfect, to EASA rules now. And post-COVID, these squeezes have become more and more obvious. We have become a bit of an outlier and behind some of our colleagues and other nations' FTLs. And the other thing that's been biting quite hard, and it depends where you are based, because it's not your problem till it becomes your problem, is car parking. In my career, I've gone from a situation at Bristol where car parking was you park next to the crew room to having an extra half an hour put on either end of my day by a bus transfer. I know some of our colleagues at the larger bases, such as Manchester Gatwick, Glasgow can often see their daily work pattern changed. And that could be very individual to the airline as reporting points and car parks change too. So what have we done about it? We are looking to capture data because whilst we can all have I would say that when these things happen to us, fatigue or the car parking runaround, it's a very acute pain. It happens in a moment, you get frustrated in a moment, but often the moment passes and that data isn't always captured. The companies tend to have their own fatigue reporting systems, which is great, and we're not trying to do away with that. That's a very important point. But what we have tried to create is something that is very easy, that are pilot friendly and familiar. That's why our app works on your devices, be it an iOS platform or a Android platform. And the idea is that whilst you're post-flight and either fatigued or waiting for a bus, you can simply log into your phone and capture that data. All data is good data, and we have made the reporting overhead as low as possible, so you can get away with only a few taps to do that point in reporting. However, if you want to fill in more data, and we would encourage you to do, it is simply available for a second page, and the more data we have, the more impactful we will be. We'll cover off what we're going to do with this data once we collect it a little bit later in the webinar. But I'll hand over in a couple of seconds now to Glenn, who will take us through a live demonstration of both the fatigue reporting side of the app and the car park tracking. Over to you, Glenn.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I think it's really important to highlight, first of all, what fatigue is and what sort of fatigue should be reported. I know that quite typically we report cumulative fatigue in the home environment, right? So you finished your trip or you finished a block of work as it is in short haul, and you decide, I don't really feel fit enough to come in for my next trip. And so you put in a fatigue report to the employer. So that's cumulative fatigue that you've decided has reached a certain tipping point in the home environment, and so you're not coming into work. But if you think about your typical pattern of flying in a month, why is it that the fatigue reports tend overwhelmingly to occur in the home environment? Surely, at least, even considering fatigue, cumulative fatigue only, half of these reports should be happening en route. And they're not happening en route because everybody wants to get home, right? And so what that means is we're actually flying whilst fatigue. We're carrying the fatigue into the operational environment simply to get ourselves home, whether we think that's for personal reasons or thinking about the customers, the commercial interest, or whatever. We are normalizing flying while fatigued. Yes, there's also fatigue that occurs from disturbed rest, whether it's the young children at home, whether it's the local fire engine in New York, the jackhammer going in Edinburgh, or whatever else. The effect of loss of sleep is fatigue. Some employers will try to tell you that there's a difference between fatigue and tiredness, and this all becomes a bit semantic, and it's a distinction without a difference. And so if you find then that you're flying and you're yawning and you're struggling to keep awake, or you're making errors, or maybe you can't keep awake, so you take some controlled rest, or you go for a walk in the cabin, these are all examples of fatigue which should be reported to the operator and into the operator's fatigue system. Because pilots typically haven't been reporting this, when people like Mark and I go along on behalf of our local council and we challenge the employer and we say there is a fatigue problem that you're doing nothing about, the employer says, well, what do you mean we haven't had any reports? Have you had any reports? And so maybe there are a number of reasons why people aren't reporting. Maybe they don't feel comfortable reporting. Maybe they feel they'll be victimized by the employer. Maybe they feel the employer's system doesn't do anything. They're not going to do anything with the data anyway. And so within BALPA, we have provided a safe space through our app to report all in-flight events of fatigue, all loss of alertness in the operational environment. And the CAA has very kindly said to us, look, as part of our FTL review, if you will share the data as a credible, trusted source with us, we can use that in the consideration of our FTLs. What we'd obviously like you to do, in addition to reporting to BALPA, for the CAA's FTL review, mirror those same reports in your company's operator fatigue system. No one's going to sack you for doing it. And if you really do feel that you are less safe reporting to your company than you're reporting to through BALPA to the CAA, then the CAA will be very interested to see the difference in the number of reports to BALPA and the number going to your company. And they'll also be interested to see, well, what is the divergence between reports to TUI versus to EasyJet versus to Jet2 versus to British Airways, which will actually say something secondary but very interesting about safety culture at each of the operating airlines. Why do we want to make FTL changes in the big picture? Well, obviously, one, there's the safety case. Pilots not being alert whilst doing their job is not a good idea. Yes, we have good automation and modern airplanes, but flying around while knackered is just not great. Yeah. What does doing so do to you in the longer term? Well, it affects your health. And it doesn't just affect your health and your ability to keep your medical. Ultimately, it's shortening your life. And by not having the correct number of pilots within your airline because you are flying whilst fatigued, well, you're allowing your airline to have fewer pilots than they really should have. And so that's actually holding your pay down, isn't it? Because you are creating a looser labor market than should realistically exist if they had the correct number of pilots so that nobody should have to fly whilst fatigued. So we find ourselves in this perverse situation where, especially when we look across the Atlantic and wonder, why are their fatigue rules and their terms and conditions and how they feel about their work different? We are creating a looser market by not reporting fatigued, holding our own pay down, shortening our lives and ruining our health, and ultimately creating a less safe flight as well for our customers. So there's several reasons why we want to achieve change. And so step one, report all events, all instances of any reduction in in-flight alertness, which we'll call fatigue in simple English, through the BALPA app. As best as you can, mirror this with reports to your company. If you don't feel you can report it to your company, tell us why within the app. And then we'll do the heavy lifting with the CAA and with Parliament, etc. But we need you to do your part by filling in these reports. So without further ado then, I'll go to the app itself. I'll share my screen. Okay. Can we all see my screen, everybody?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
Thank you.
okay. So there's a home screen with lots of apps, as you typically have on your pilot device, and one of them is BALPA Real Time. So I'll open that. So when you log in, normally the first page you have is to choose your airline, to enter your registration key and your unique airline code. So individual comms should have said to you, whether it's a 5-letter crew code or a 6-digit staff number or whatever it is, it's not your BALPA membership number. This is open to all pilots, and you're using your airline staff ID or crew code as specified. So there are 4 features, 3 of which relate to tracking transport and duty time performance, and 1 is about fatigue. Depending on how many reports you've submitted, you get a little counter at the bottom telling you how many of each you have submitted through the app. So in my case, you see 6 fatigue reports, and so that reflects 6 flights in the actual live environment where I've put in a fatigue report to BALPA, and I have mirrored it with a report to my operator. So I'll start with the fatigue bit. Page 1 is really easy to fill out. Asks you for a departure date. Let's assume the date is today. I am flying flight number 179, and I am coming from, let's say, JFK to London Heathrow. Or in fact, I'll make it more realistic. I'll call that the 178. Maybe I'm doing more than 1 sector, because my lucky day I've diverted into Gander, and now I'm flying a 2nd sector, so there are 2 sectors. I can add up to 4 sectors within 1 report, and if I've pressed the button in error, I can remove the number of sectors. It asks how many operating pilots. You select how many operating pilots. It asks about the number of controlled rest periods. So we're not just interested in controlled rest. We're interested in all physical and cognitive signs of fatigue and all mitigations used, whether that's walking around the cabin, drinking 10 times as much coffee as you normally would, keeping the lights on in the flight deck throughout the night. But because controlled rest is such a prevalent tool, we've decided to put that on the front page so we can capture that straight away. Number of controlled rest periods. This doesn't relate to the entire crew. This relates to you as an individual. So maybe I've done 2 controlled rest periods, 40 minutes each, an hour and 20 of a 7-hour flight. Or maybe I've just done 1 controlled rest period. That's for me. That's not for the entire crew. Each pilot needs to report individually. So it may be that my OMA says I shouldn't take more than 45 minutes in one go. But back in the real world, I've done a continuous stretch of an hour and 10. Be honest and tell us. The CAA understands how the real world works. Your airline management understands how the real world works. This is non-jeopardy. This is completely confidential. Your name code or your crew code or your staff number isn't going anywhere. This is all macro data for the CAA to understand how the real world works. So if I've taken an hour and 10 in one go, simply just tell us you've done an hour and 10 in one go. So we ask for 2 fatigue scores, one at top of descent and one at the phase of flight in which you encountered the highest fatigue. Why do we ask for fatigue at top of descent? Because it's a standard industry measure for all companies that use a fatigue risk management system. It is a metric that is captured. So it may be because I've done an hour and 10 minutes of controlled rest that I don't actually feel too bad at top of descent. So maybe I don't feel alert or very alert or extremely alert, which would be unusual at top of descent, 6 hours into a flight, but maybe I feel rather alert. So that's good enough. So I've put that on there. Under ICAO principles, any KSS score from 4 and higher really is indicating some level of fatigue. If I'm at 3, there is no fatigue. And if you're at 5, neither alert nor sleepy or higher, you really should be putting in a fatigue report to your company. And if you're finding yourself up on this end of the scale, really you should submit an MOR to the CAA. I must emphasize that an MOR to the CAA is, again, zero jeopardy. No one's pulling your license. No one's going to phone you up and ask you how this happened. They understand how the real world works, and this is actually critical data that they need to collect, not just through BALPA, but directly to the authority as well. But in today's case, controlled rest has done the trick, and so I feel rather alert, so I tick that. So it asks about the highest fatigue phase of flight. Well, it may be that on the hour-and-a-half bus journey from the hotel in Chicago to the airport, I actually get to the curbside thinking, I actually feel really knackered. And so at pre-flight, before we've even stepped off the curb, I'm actually feeling a little bit sleepy, but with no effort to keep awake. And back in the real world, I'm still going to depart and go flying, but in any serious safety analysis, this is not good news at all. So if this is the reality, please tell us, and this will help the regulator inform the regulator what changes need to be made. It may be that I'm taxiing out at New York JFK and the taxi time is exceeding an hour. And so actually while taxiing out, I'm not feeling that great, neither alert nor sleepy, KSS 5. That is actually a serious fatigue event in and of itself. And if I did nothing else but simply hit send report, that would be valuable information for BALPA, for the CAA, and I dare say if you put in the fatigue report to your company, for the company to consider in the way that it plans its trips. But typically, your highest fatigue will be in the cruise, right? At a period of low workload, which is what's driving the need for controlled rest or other mitigations. And so in addition to telling us, when you say to your colleague, look, mate, I can barely keep my eyes open. Do you mind if I close my eyes for 30 minutes? You're probably at a KSS 8. Tell us that you're at a KSS 8 and also report to your operator, whether it's an ASR or a dedicated fatigue reporting form, exactly what's going on so that we can actually finally do something about it rather than envy jurisdictions where they have done something about it. So if you're finding yourself up here, we really want to gather some additional data. So we go to the additional data page. It's a bit more to fill out, but believe me, it's well worth it. So your report time might be, 6 p.m. So UK time, probably after 24-hour layover in the long haul example, and we have short haul examples as well. You're actually reporting at 2300 Zulu for a departure time of, let's say, 01:15, hour and 15 before. And this bit you can't complete until you finish the flight, which is fair enough. So we're getting in at, let's say, 09:05. and getting in at 09:05, we're off duty, not 30 minutes later at 09:35. But back in the real world, we're on a remote stand, or we have customers of reduced mobility, or we need to speak to engineering. And so we're actually off at 09:55. So before we've even finished completing the fatigue report, I'm already capturing here that it took you 50 minutes between arrival and going off duty. So I'd be minded to say to the employer, well, on 80% of our reports, 30 minutes isn't sufficient time post-flight. So this may actually drive changes to the off-duty allowance, which drives minimum rest requirements, trip build in some airlines that would drive something called credit, etc. So the example we're doing here is of a 2-pilot trip. So bunk rest used, not applicable. But if it were 3 of us and we were using a bunk, we'd ask the total time rested. And again, that would be your time in the bunk, not the time for the total rest for the crew. But let's say no bunk today. Was there reduced alertness in an operating seat? Well, probably yes. That's why I'm doing this report in the first place. And it says here, includes whenever countermeasures are used. In other words, if you found yourself drinking 3 times as much coffee, or needing to go for a 20-minute walk in the cabin while one person's left in the flight deck, or you needed to do some controlled rest in the seat, the fact that you're using countermeasures implies there is reduced alertness. So obviously you tick yes. So what's causing this for you? Well, in my US East Coast example, it may be a bit difficult to sleep in the daytime. There could be other stuff going on in your life, such as stress. And accepting that there is stress going on doesn't ruin the fatigue report, because stress is a part of everyday life. So is cumulative fatigue. And a decent FTL scheme should take into account lived circumstances of the average person in the population, okay? So we don't need to all be 25 years old in perfect health and stress-free. We need to be able to live some actual life circumstances, and the FTL scheme should cater for that. So ticking these boxes does not reduce the value of the report. Now, what's going on with your roster? In the New York case, I probably got in the evening before, had 24 hours rest, and now I'm going from flying out in the daytime to flying through the night. So that's called an early to late transition. It could be that I'm a short haul pilot and I am doing a series of early starts, so I'd want to tick that instead. It could be that I'm a short haul pilot and have done the late flight from the UK into Istanbul. I've had 2 nights, but then I'm leaving the hotel at 5 a.m. local time, which body clock has me getting up at about 2 a.m. UK. So that's a late to early transition. And then you can sort of look through the list and think, what applies to me? What's happened to you pre-flight? Well, maybe nothing's happened to you pre-flight, and it's simply the early to late transition that's the problem. But it could be that I was trying to get some sleep in the daytime, and lo and behold, a knock came on the door at 2 p.m. housekeeping, and it's interrupted my pre-flight sleep, and I never really fell asleep in the way that I was before. Again, that doesn't ruin the fatigue report. That simply means that a normal feature of staying in the hotel in the daytime is that hotel rest is sometimes disrupted. And an FTL scheme, crewing complement, and the rest period en route should be tolerant of these sorts of events. What's going on in the operational environment? Well, it could be that you've used commander's discretion. It could be that there are weather delays. It could be an event requiring an ASR. And so we have listed within our comms a number of events that really should require a fatigue report or an ASR, such as change in augmentation, such as discretion to reduce the max FDP or to increase the max FDP. And so you think about what you're actually doing, look at the comms and tick a relevant box. Anything we haven't thought of, yes, tell us in free text. Physical signs. Well, you'll know your own physical signs. It may be that you start yawning just before you say to your colleague, you know what, can I close my eyes for 20 minutes? It could be that you start fidgeting or shaking your leg as I typically would. Or maybe your head starts nodding off. Or maybe there's some other weird thing that you do. Tick yes and tell us what your physical signs are. Cognitive signs. In my case, I just completely missed the call at 30 West, right? It could be that you lose track of the fuel plan for a little while. It could be that you're just making a few little subtle errors. You're missing a couple of FMA calls and your colleague is picking you up on it, and that's how you know what's going on. So again, think about what's going on. And if there's anything that isn't listed, just tell us. So under additional countermeasures, it says report controlled rest on the previous page, again, because of its prevalence, but then tell us what else you do to stay awake. Maybe you go for a little walk around the cabin, leaving a single pilot. Maybe you eat a whole bunch of chocolates. Maybe you drink a bit more coffee than you normally would, or you just talk your head off like I'm doing now. So tick the relevant boxes, please, or circles as it is. Any other countermeasure factors not listed above? We'll just go ahead and tell us. It's completely confidential. So you may, I don't know, want to say seat on 787, uncomfortable, so slept on floor. Now, you probably wouldn't say that to your employer. If you want to put that in the box to BALPA, absolutely do so. And again, pilots at the CAA understand what goes on in the real world, and we need to understand what's going on in the real world so we can do something about it. Nothing is off limits. It is all confidential. No one's name is being shared, but we need to know what's going on so we can actually do something about it. Okay, point made. Have you reported this via your company ASR as it is in some airlines, or dedicated fatigue report as it is in others? If the answer is yes, well, good for you. If the answer is no, well, why not? Maybe I think I'll get in trouble. Maybe I don't think it'll be used appropriately. You know what? I was just too tired to do anything, or I don't think they're going to do anything about it anyway. Select multiple reasons if multiple reasons are relevant. And anything additionally you want to tell us, please do. If you want to say on this particular route, I always suffer the same way, then say on this particular route, I all suffer the same way. And again, the data will drive the change. Once I'm all done, I go save additional data. I can review anything that I've put in already. Maybe I've changed my mind and I realize that I actually had a great effort to keep awake, KSS9 again, and you should be putting in an MOR if that's how you feel. And then I hit send report. On the final page, are there any comments that you want to share with BALPA? You can tell us how great this is or what we could be doing better. If you do not wish to be contacted, tick this box. If you don't tick this box, I may pick up on your comments and say, you know what, thanks for this report. Do you want to have a chat? If you don't want to have a chat with us, tick that box, and then we would contact you. If you're off Wi-Fi, you can click save to send later, or you can just hit submit now. And then the data is successfully sent to the BALPA server. Start again. Fatigue report counter is changed, and then back into the main page. So there's some other features here. Departing down route allows your CC to help you have the correct journey times from the hotel. So maybe we're planning to leave at 0800 in the morning. And so we should be departing the hotel at 0630. The company has planned us to have a 45-minute journey getting in at 7:15. But in fact, what's actually happening is we're getting to the airport at 6:55. And with enough data, that allows your CC to say to the company, the journey time allowance is too much. You're getting people out of bed unnecessarily, and you're fatiguing them as a result. So we also measure the time between getting to the curb. Apologies, BA pilots, this will already be familiar to you. And the time you're getting to the aircraft. So it may be that with our 8 o'clock departure at this particular airport, we're getting to the aircraft at 7:30. In other words, there's not enough time because of how long it takes to get through the airport. And so this is where your CC would say to the company, you know what, we need to agree an earlier report time so people are not rushing and making mistakes, which could have serious consequences. Or it may be that going through the airport in Jersey, in the Channel Islands, you're through to the aircraft in 10 minutes. And so maybe we could actually make the report time a little later. Again, the data will drive the change. You can enable reminders. You can select when you want to be reminded so you don't forget to complete the app. You can turn reminders back off. Again, an opportunity to comment and then submit now, and then that goes into our system. Because the app is live, I won't submit that because it'll corrupt the data. Likewise, arriving at home base. you want to get home and be on your way. You've arrived into Manchester as a TUI pilot. You were supposed to arrive at 2300 late at night, and it's just your lucky day. You're in at 23:15, so you're tired and you're thinking about the drive home. Fair enough. And so you find that you've arrived, as you say, at 23:15. You're off the aircraft, not in 10 minutes and off duty in 30 minutes, but it actually takes you a full 20 minutes just to make it off the aircraft. And by the time you clear customs, because you had to wait for your bag that you checked in, it's now 23:55. So you can see we're already seeing 40 minutes between on chocks and finishing duty. So maybe your CC wants to push for a different standard allowance post-flight. And now you want to get to the car park. So you just want a bus to be there waiting for you and to get you there as quickly as possible. But now you find yourself waiting forever for a bus. And so now you find yourself actually getting to your car at 00:55. It's taking you a full hour to get to your car. So here it is, you're on chocks at 23:15 and you're not to the car until 00:55. And then suddenly, within the BALPA app, we can compare what's going on between your being on chocks and getting to your car and the fatigue that Manchester pilots are experiencing when they go flying the following day. And suddenly the CAA sees there are two problems. One, car parking is actually affecting people's lives. Two, maybe the operator, whether it's TUI or EasyJet or whoever, should actually change their off-duty standard time. And three, the FTL scheme should probably be tightened up a little bit to reflect that this is the real world that people live through. You don't simply put the chocks on in your car in 30 minutes and home in 10, but this is actually what goes on. So again, you submit this data and it goes into our data set, which is helping us to help you. So I think that pretty much ends the demo of the app. So I shall stop sharing my screen. But again, guys and ladies, you can see that the value here is actually quite diverse. And the more data you put in, the more tools you give us to improve your car parking, your busing arrangements, if that's how you get to work, relevant report times, relevant post-duty allowances, relevant crewing levels, and relevant rest periods down route. And then without the data, well, nothing changes. And so there's every incentive to report. As a final thought, sharing this app with other colleagues at ECA and having safety discussions with US ALPA, they understand the problems that we go through in the UK, and they want to see us fix stuff right because we're all invested in each other's safety practices. And for some of us, there is revenue sharing between airlines. So maybe you're part of Star Alliance or One World or SkyTeam or what have you. So maybe you fly for Virgin and colleagues at Delta are very interested in your levels of fatigue. Maybe you fly for British Airways and at American Airlines, they're quite interested to know the different levels of fatigue. So they're allies far and wide who want us to be better, but we just now need to put in the data to help ourselves. Joji, over to you.
Terrific. Thank you, Glenn, for that comprehensive demonstration. I hope that's whet all of your appetites to contribute to this. Thank you also to Mark for sharing your insights as to the importance of this. I'll just talk very briefly around some sort of next steps and what to expect. This is also a trigger for you guys and girls to ask us questions. Conscious we got 3 in there already, so thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll come to those questions shortly, and then we'll look to wrap up after that. So in terms of next steps, well, actually, just before I go to next steps, just to emphasize something that Glenn said around the data being confidential, completely anonymous, information that we put into the CA review to inform the review will be aggregated, trends, that sort of thing. There's no identified information shared outside of BALPA, so just to emphasize that point. In terms of sort of timescales, some of you may be thinking slightly odd time of year to be launching this sort of thing. Why not in the summer? It's a very good question. What we want to do is you want to use this time to really, optimize the app itself, get you comfortable with the sort of the process of sharing data and getting used to the app. But also take the opportunity, acknowledging there's lots of you out there that are very busy. Your airlines are very busy leading up to Christmas, through Christmas, on whether it's ski charters, that sort of thing, cargo operators. So we do want to gather, important information, but also it's an opportunity to sort of learn how to optimize the process. Clearly, the intention is to ramp up in the spring to cover the full summer program next year. So obviously we're going to hit the data collection very hard then. So we gather that full spectrum of data. Very importantly, conscious of the importance of feeding back regularly, we'll do that. We look forward to sharing insights from the data, allied to progress with the CAFTL review as well. So keep you informed as to how that's going. We do plan some sort of more formal kind of outputs from this, a 6-month report, another one after 12 months. We also plan to hold hopefully a parliamentary event, maybe coinciding with the 6-month review, so we can start to leverage some of the political levers that we've got out there for change. Yeah, so keep a good lookout for comms, both written from BALPA and from your company councils, and also other media such as podcasts. We really do want to try and find a way of communicating this information as sort of relevantly and what suits you best. And when we get to, that 12-month point, it's not necessarily the end. We'd love to see this become almost like an ops normal thing, kind of like an SOP. So those of you that feel the value of this, if you want to continue sharing this information with us into the future, then we'd look to keep that option open as well, make that available continuously. So I'll stop there. I'll go to the questions. We've got 3 so far. What I'll do is perhaps group a couple of them as sort of kind of app related. We'll cover those 2 first, and then come to the other question after that. And we've had a 4th one come in. Excellent. So in terms of the app related questions, maybe for you, Glenn, one is around report time. On the app regarding report time. Is this the scheduled report time or the actual report time? Conscious that often they're quite big differences in the 2. So one around report time, and the second is around the actual sort of setting up of the app itself and the key. So we've got a question around the what key should be used. Just before Glenn starts answering that, just to say we did put out communications a week or so ago with FAQs and instructions on how to use the app. So we'll make sure those are available on the website, so you can refer back to those as well. So Glenn, would you like to take those 2 questions?
Yes. So let's see. Report time, scheduled report time or actual report time. Scheduled for some operators isn't sufficient to ensure the flight departs, so individuals are starting work earlier to mitigate this. David, I think that's a fantastic question. And so my advice would be, unless you feel in particular industrial jeopardy, not to start work earlier and to leave when you're safe to do so. And ironically, it is the punctuality, performance or lack thereof, unfortunately more than in many instances, the safety considerations that will actually drive a change to your report time. So you are never obligated, in principle, to start work before your report time, and your local BALPA council will support you if you choose to do exactly that. So whether you are at Ryanair or you're at British Airways, doesn't matter. You shouldn't have to start work before your report time. Now, I understand the real world may be a little bit different for you. I don't know who your operator is, probably not best to put that on the chat now as well. And you may feel under pressure to start earlier. Unfortunately, because this is fatigue data, which should mirror the operator's fatigue report, the report time you have to put in is quite simply your official report time. And so if you're coming into work 30 minutes earlier, do not put that as your report time unless for the purposes of the fatigue report that you will also submit to your operator, how you would calculate your FDPs if you needed to assess your FTL limits in anger, that you're willing to use that report time. Otherwise, you just have to use the published report time, which is really what you should be working towards. If your flight is delayed and you have been notified of the delay with sufficient time that it doesn't infringe on your rest period and your actual report time has changed, then certainly put in the new report time. But I guess one of the takeaways here is we really need to push for report times that are reasonable, so that you're not coming in early and starting work early and not being able to capture that. David, if that doesn't answer the question, please do come back with a follow-on. Stephen, key to use during registration, as Joji said, that is covered within the comms for the app. So each airline section will have its own unique key, TUI, CC, British Airways, BACC, Virgin Atlantic, Victor Alpha, VACC, etc. And that's listed within the comms on the BALPA portal. So you can find it there. If there is a problem finding it, then get in touch with us at BALPA, and we'll ensure that you get that as well. So that's those two questions. Joji, where would you like us to go next? Oops. I think you're still on mute, actually, Joji. Sorry.
Thank you, Glenn.
Yeah.
Rookie error. So yeah, Carl says if we must comply with national restrictions, for example, in Saudi serving alcohol in their airspace, and for alcohol limitations in Scottish airspace, then why are we not complying with USA restrictions on prohibiting controlled rest in the flight deck in US airspace? So it's banned for US operators, US registered aircraft. So why not us? Who'd fancy taking that one?
Yeah, of course I can. Yeah, no, of course I can fancy taking that one. So my informed opinion would be that controlled rest in US airspace is not allowed. 14 CFR 9105 paragraph A, which has come up a number of times for interpretation by the FAA, both from airlines, from business jet operators, those wanting to see controlled rest in the United States, and the FAA Office of the Chief Counsel, which publishes what they call in the American system letters of interpretation, which then create essentially binding precedent, have consistently come back to say that controlled rest does not fall within the US definition of physiological break in flight, is not an alternative to correct crewing, and is not allowed. So that's the FAA's position. The question then becomes, do you have to follow their rules in their airspace as a foreign operator? And so I would give, starting off, the example of you are driving your Canadian lorry on your Canadian driving license on a US road, and you think that perhaps because you're in a Canadian registered vehicle on a Canadian license, you don't need to comply with US rules. And you find that when the police stop you, they very quickly disabuse you of that idea. Now, what tends to happen in flight is they don't get to stop you. And so the question then becomes not one of legality, but one of enforcement. But before getting to that, how are the US regulations structured? There are specific things that relate to US operators only. So holding a US license under Part 61, that is about American pilots. It has nothing to do with you. The fatigue rules that you use under Part 121, that's for US operators. Part 129, foreign operators, they operate to their own scheme in their own country. Nothing to do with you. But general operating and flight rules, Part 91, applies to everybody. And that's why you have to comply with 250 knots below 10,000 feet or 200 knots within the airport traffic area, etc. That's why you need to comply with holding speed limits. That's why you need to comply with their alcohol restrictions, even if alcohol restrictions in your particular jurisdiction may be more lax. You don't get to say, I'm complying with my own rules. You must always comply with Part 91. Now, understandably, UK operators may not wish to answer this question. I have it on good authority that this question has been put to the FAA for an interpretation as it relates to foreign carriers, and that is in the interpretation queue. I'm confident that when it is actually answered by the FAA, it will say, unsurprisingly, that you must comply with Part 91. But in the interim, I would caution BALPA members that it would be foolish to assume that you don't have to comply with this particular US law in US airspace and leave it until you've inadvertently flown through the Washington, D.C. air defense identification area, or you've landed somewhere having missed a number of radio calls and someone from the FBI and FAA come along to say, do you realize you just flew for the last hour and you missed all the radio calls? To then find out that they expected you to comply with local law and your flight ops manager is not there to say, well, actually, I told my colleague that American law didn't apply to him or her in the United States. And so that, even in using controlled rest, that sort of asks a few broader questions. If you're departing the UK and you're flying to the US, well, controlled rest should be happening at a period of low workload. So I would imagine typically over the Atlantic, if at all, rather than in US airspace. And then likewise, departing the US on a 2-pilot trip from the US East Coast or a 3-pilot trip coming from California or something, if you're needing controlled rest that early in the flight, maybe you should consider your fatigue position and say to your employer that actually I need to delay my departure because my level of fatigue is so high, rather than taking controlled rest sort of an hour into the flight and then finding yourself falling afoul of US rules. Ultimately, we cannot tell you what choices to make, but I think the informed opinion that BALPA would give you, having consulted with US ALPA and their legal teams and others, is that quite simply the US regulations do apply.
Thanks, Len. That's comprehensive. There is another question related to controlled rest. So we'll take that one and then come back to the question before that. So this is more around reporting. So the point's made that controlled rest at this person's airline is normalized day to day. Some people do that just almost sort of habitually, it seems. And the question is, would you recommend the BALPA fatigue report for any controlled rest? And related to that, can I create a BALPA report if my colleague feels the need to control rest to use that, but doesn't want to report themselves? So Glenn, Mark, what do you think to that one?
I'm coming if you like with that one.
Yeah.
So, yes, I think absolutely we want to capture how much prevalence of control rest is out there. I think if you're looking away at most ops manuals, phrase control rest, it should be a measure to be used when unplanned for fatigue grabs hold of you during the operation. However, we probably all know that there's routes where people are using it habitually as part of just getting through the day, which was never designed for. So it's very crucial that we do capture it where possible. So, like I say, it's on the first page of the fatigue report. It should only take you a few seconds post-flight. So please do put it in. Secondly, if your colleague isn't on the app, first of all, encourage him to A, be a BALPA member, and B, download the app and use the app. I would suggest that the comments box would probably be the best place for that on the whatever, either the fatigue app or the well, it would be the fatigue app in this case, yes. So use that there would be my suggestion there. And that's answered those questions. Do you want to speak about the question from Ian, Joji, or shall I do it?
Could I follow up? Could I just follow up on Mark there? Yeah. So definition-wise, controlled rest, unexpected fatigue onset or fatigue that is expected to become greater later in the flight is again why you're doing it, is the justification. Completely endorse what Mark says. If your colleague doesn't want to report, then report for them, and certainly use the comments box to say, this report is for my colleague who didn't even feel that he was comfortable enough or she was comfortable enough to fill out the BALPA app. So I'm doing it for this individual. And again, for our friends at the CAA, this is all really useful stuff because it's telling them about the safety culture on the line. I mean, if we're in a place where people need to get rest, but don't even think they can report it themselves, then that is of interest to the wider safety system. And I think likewise, you can submit a fatigue report to the operator. Maybe there's a dedicated form, as there is at Virgin Atlantic and some others within FRMS. Maybe it's a fatigue ASR. When you submit a fatigue report, even through an ASR, it doesn't actually ask you to name names within the crew. It's just that controlled rest was required. So I don't think you not saying it was my mate, not me, creates any additional jeopardy for anybody. And if you feel that's the case at your employer, so you've done the BALPA app only and not the report to the company, then again, you tick that additional info box saying not reported to the operator, fear of reprisal. And so that gets the message across to the FTL review while informing everybody of what's going on with the safety culture. Is that a fair addition, Mark, to context-wise? Yeah.
Great stuff. And yeah, and just to emphasize that word, Glenn used context. So whatever thing you're reporting through this app, if you feel able and you have the time and inclination, please include as much context as possible. So when we start to categorize these things, it's important to be able to say, yeah, for this application of this mitigation, these were the contextual factors. These were contextual factors for something else. It just allows us to be much more rich in the feedback we give to the review. Just taking, I think, no, it's now the penultimate. We've got one more new question. So Ian's question around accessibility to non-members. We certainly welcome non-members using the app and sharing data. The slight sort of caveat to that is we're not sort of being explicit or overt in publicising this. Obviously, we feel it's an important kind of benefit of BALPA membership to have this facility. So we're not necessarily sort of broadcasting it out publicly, join this app, submit your data. But certainly if you fly with people that are not members, please talk about this, share what we're trying to do here, encourage them to be part of this, ultimately, become a BALPA member and sort of receive all of the benefits of that membership, including this project. So hopefully that answers your question there, Ian. I think the last question we have from Stephen: collecting this important data does increase the reporting rates. Are we at all concerned that there might be unintended consequences in terms of affecting company reporting? I'm sure each of us probably has a thought there. Mark, you got your hand up.
Yes, Stephen. From the concept of the design of the app, and as we say, it's not ever meant to replace the company's schemes. We have tried to design the app to be familiar on your personal device and to be done in a relatively short period of time. So we would hope it doesn't. The use of the app isn't the driver for not reporting to the company. Now, if something else ends up being a driver for not reporting to the company, a classic example would be that you requires you to be at a desktop computer, or the software is more difficult. You get in your car, you drive home, you get up the following morning, you take the kids to school, and the moment gets lost, or any of the other reasons that Glenn mentioned earlier that are available to report within the app. So we hope the reporting overhead isn't that onerous. It has been designed to be done quickly, swiftly, and gather data. When people are feeling the acute effects of either fatigue or waiting for 45 minutes in the middle of the night for a bus to turn up, that's the idea, and it doesn't get lost. We would, as BALPA, we very much encourage you to use your company reporting systems as well. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Mark. Glenn, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I know it feels like a bit of a hassle to do both. I mean, I've been doing both, and so I recognize that the importance of this FTL review and changing UK FTLs is so critical to our long-term health, to how long I'm actually going to live, literally, to how that actually impacts pay and conditions and to the safety of flying, that I think it's actually worth it to me to, you know what, I'll make the effort and fill out this BALPA app towards the FTL. And for those higher KSS events, 5 to 9, I will ensure that I also fill out the company report. And so I've actually found that it's easy while filling out the BALPA app to take a little screenshot of both pages and then actually use that later on when I sit down to do the company app. So one, the reporting is consistent, but two, when I'm even more knackered and struggle to find the motivation, that I can look at my phone where I've captured the data for BALPA towards the FTL review and then put in the data to the operator. And so the more we put into this, guys, is the more we get out of it. If we can't, if we think doing one makes me less likely to do the other, then we get less out of it. If we're willing to do both, then we get the most out of it. So I'd obviously encourage people to do both, but certainly for people who don't feel safe or confident doing the company report, the BALPA app is zero jeopardy. But ideally, we want you to do both, particularly for higher level fatigue events. Stephen, I hope that answers the question sufficiently.
Thank you, Glenn. And yeah, just sort of a few words of reassurance in terms of how the app's created, the data inputs we're using good practice, like a good practice fatigue risk management principles. So the things you see in there are very relevant to the management of fatigue. And as Glenn said, if you want to use those as an aid memoir for creating your written fatigue report to your company, then that's a great use of the app as well. Just checking just to see if we've had any final questions. I don't think we have. We're coming up to the hour, so probably a good time to wrap up. So I'm going to come to Mark and Glenn just for sort of closing remarks from their perspectives, and then I'll bring the webinar to a close. So Mark.
Yep, thanks Jody, and thanks Glenn for all we've done here. Couple of wrapping up remarks. The version of the app that Glenn demonstrated was the BA keyed one. The CCs have had an input into the apps, and they're all subtly different to reflect your operation. Example would be that some operators use the Samparelli and some use the KSS fatigue scale. You don't have to worry about them. You don't have to look them up. You don't even have to ask ChatGPT, because the app itself will show you what the scores are when you move the slider along. Secondly, to build on Jody's point about the timing of release, it's out now, it is functioning. We want more and more people to buy into it and hit the summer season to get lots of good data on our 6-month point. Possibility, we have done quite a lot of work on the app. There's been quite a lot of testing, more so with the iOS than possibly the Android. You might find a couple of bugs. If you do, please feed them back to us, and we'll get them quashed, and the app will work in tickety-boo. You might find a couple of more bits and pieces coming into the app as time goes by, as well as we update it. So that will happen. Yep, let's capture this data. Let's in the acute phase, while we got the time on the bus waiting while you're feeling it. It's why it's designed for. We don't want to lose this data. The data does and has driven change. Those of you who work for BA may have seen the app in its first form, and that has driven meaningful report time change within BA. And then please, great you guys are here. We know at the moment round about 10% of our pilot population have downloaded the app. We can see the click-through rates to the App Store and the email. Please encourage your colleagues to download it too, get familiar with it. Any feedback you think we could do better, please pop to us. Let's us be the catalyst for change. We don't want to end up like the US having something like a buffalo that causes a change. This data will be hard. The CAA are expecting it, and let's use our combined cross-BALPA, cross-industry workforce here to affect change that affects us all. So that's my final words. So thank you very much for attending, and I'll pass on to Glenn.
Yeah, just to follow up, as Mark mentions, the Colgan 3407 accident, fatal accident, sometimes change is slow. So even following that accident, it took them 5 years to get Part 117 passed. and live and up and running alongside other changes such as the ATP rule, etc., Pilot Records Improvement Act, so forth. But it took them 5 years to do that, and then a further 5 years to bottom out all of the requests for interpretation tabled by both ALPA, APA, and the airlines. And so we may not have all of our dreams fulfilled within a 6-month or a 1-year period, but ideally we want to get to the same point without the accident. So then, just as a final comment, well, why are we doing this? Because we don't like where we are. We know where we want to be, and this is really the realistic way to get there. So where is it that we want to be? Well, you fly aircraft as much as I do, so I don't need to tell you what that is. Maybe you're a short-haul pilot and you think, I feel awful after too many early starts, and my ability to fly the max FDP changes on day 4 or day 5 of early starts, and that needs to be changed. You may realize that in the US system, as we draw the example, they don't just have FDP limits, they have block hour limits. We don't have block hour limits in the same way. And so you may be somewhere where you hear them saying, well, it's too long now, I need to go back to the gate, because they will trigger going over the block hour limit, whether it's 8 hours for 2 pilots, 11 for 3, whatever it is. But you're just working to an FDP limit, so the length of actual block time flying is unlimited. That is a problem. And for those of us doing the longer range stuff, or even short haul night duties, flying through the night is not the same on the body as flying through the day. And the way we currently fly is destroying our health, and it's shortening our lives. And we know that's just simply a fact. We see post-COVID the uptick in early medical retirements, loss of license, and we don't want to see that happening to more pilots than this needs to happen to. I mean, I would hope 0, but sadly it will take time to achieve change. So we know what the changes are we want, and we have to drive them with data. So Joji is a cracking head of safety here at BALPA. Mark and I work hard, but there's only so much we can do unless you provide the data. So giving us the data allows us to help you. And I think when we share the data as well with members, inevitably it will drive public interest. And separate from whatever pressure we want to put on the CAA, the public will want to know, well, hang on, why is it in one country pilots are flying more tired than pilots from another country? And this is a question that politicians will have to answer. So the appetite for change, the pressure for change will be more than just a technical consultation. So we will have lots of levers when we actually have the evidence. Until we have the evidence, then it's all just talk down at the bar. So please give us the data, and then we can take it from there. Joji?
Excellent. Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Mark. And thank you to everyone on the webinar today. Thanks for your questions, which have been very informative for us and interesting to answer. Just to say, the video, the recording for this webinar will be made available on the portal. We'll include links to the FAQs around the project, instructions on how to download and use the app, so we'll remind of those again. So to keep an eye out for that. In terms of sort of next comms, we'll be in touch hopefully quite soon, maybe early in the new year, with an update on how things are going, starting to share some of the insights from the data we've collected, hopefully. So yeah, we look forward to doing that. So once again, thank you for participating both today, now, and also for those that have already obviously downloaded the app and started submitting information. That's fantastic. So please keep going. Please encourage your colleagues to join us. So once again, thanks to you all. Take care, stay safe, and hopefully see you again soon. Bye for now.